Hello, everyone, and welcome to KTAL News Now. I'm your host, Anthony Mocklin, and today is Football Friday here on the show. And we'll be diving into NFL this week since college football is on a little bit of a hiatus as the college football playoff does not start for at least another week or so. And right now, we're going to be diving into some NFL stuff and matchups to look forward to. Lots of key divisional ramifications here depending on the outcomes of the games. But looking to last night's game on Thursday Night Football, we had the Atlanta Falcons taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, this one was pretty crazy at the end, if you caught the end of it. If not, I'm going to go through everything for you and just walk you through this because it was pretty crazy to see unfold. And this, for Tampa Bay, they had just activated Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan off of IR. So this is the first time that they had their top four wide receivers all on the same field together all season. That's Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, who has also had an injury history recently. You had Emeka Egbuka, who is their rookie receiver this year. And then, of course, Jalen McMillan, who were all on the field finally for the first time this season for Tampa Bay. Now, running back Sean Tucker kicked the game off with a touchdown where defensive tackle Vita Vea was in at fullback to block for him and lead the way for him into the end zone. And that got things started for Tampa Bay 7-0. And they led at the end of the first quarter. And Kyle Pitts in this game, I should have mentioned before, this was round one of the fantasy football playoffs. So if you're someone who had Kyle Pitts, you were a Pitts truther at the beginning of the season, your gamble really didn't pay off with him, but man, did he deliver in the first round of the playoffs because he ended up having 3 touchdowns in this game, which is absolutely absurd. And his first one came in the second quarter to tie things up 7-7. And then after a field goal by Chase McLaughlin for Tampa Bay, Pitts scored again for his second touchdown of the quarter to make things 14-10 at halftime after another Tampa Bay field goal. Atlanta was feeling pretty good going into half. They had the lead. So usually you would suspect that they would try to build on that momentum to start the second half, but they did the complete opposite. And it could not have gone worse for Atlanta to start the second half because Tampa would score a touchdown from Devin Culp, and then Bijan Robinson, the running back for the Falcons, ended up fumbling, and that resulted in a Chris Godwin touchdown to make things 28-14 very quickly. So Atlanta was facing a 14-point deficit. A lot of people, including myself, pretty much thought the game was wraps at that point. I didn't think Atlanta had even the smallest of chances of coming back. I just kind of chalked that one up. Didn't think they had it in them, but boy was I wrong, because they ended up marching all the way back thanks to a Bijan touchdown, although they did fail the 2-point conversion there to try to make it a 7-point game. So, and then they also capitalized off a Tampa Bay interception, which then resulted in Kyle Pitts' third touchdown to make things 28-26 in the fourth quarter. And they ended up forcing a punt from Tampa Bay to get the ball back with just over 2 minutes to go. They still had the 2-minute warning and all of their timeouts at that point. And then that's whenever they forced a punt from Tampa Bay and then got the ball back, ran a 2-minute drill. And it was absolutely chaotic because in their first few snaps of the 2-minute drill, Kirk Cousins gets sacked, fumbles the ball, but then thankfully recovers it. So that could have been really, really bad. They could have ended their game easily, and that ended up losing them 8 yards. But then to add insult to injury on top of that, they had a holding call, which now puts them at 2nd and 28, which if you any holding call, regardless if it starts on first down or not, if it's already 1st and 10, you get a holding call. Now it's 1st and 20. That is 100% a drive killer in most instances. But these are not most instances. This is a 2-minute drill with Kirk Cousin, trying to lead the way, and he ends up not faltering, even with the sack, because it's 2nd and 28. They have an incompletion. Now it's 3rd and 28. He does find Kyle Pitts for 14 yards. to make it a manageable 4th and 14, but thankfully David Sills catches a 21-yard pass from Kirk Cousins to pick up the first down and keep the game alive for the Falcons. And they ended up driving all the way down and kick a game-winning field goal thanks to Zane Gonzalez to win 29-28. I definitely did not see that coming. I'll admit, I tuned out after a certain point because I was like, oh, this is just going to be a blowout. Tampa's going to run away with this one. And that's what it seemed like to me. I don't know about you. That's how it seemed to me. But I was wrong, obviously. They came all the way back. As soon as my friend texted, yeah, it's 28-26. I'm like, what are you talking about? They were down 28-14. What happened between the last, but Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson ended up happening, I found out. And those guys, pretty good, especially Bijan Robinson, who has had a killer season, especially for fantasy football. A lot of talks of him being the number one pick in fantasy this year, and he was in most cases for the fantasy draft along with Jamar Chase. That could have gone either way, but clearly Bijan Robinson, through no fault of Jamar Chase because Joe Burrow was out for most of the year, he has delivered, I'd say, on his promise of being that high of a pick, at least a top 3 pick. Because at last I checked, I believe he was the running back 4 in fantasy in terms of points on the season. So he has absolutely delivered for fantasy managers across the country. And Pitts, again, what more can you say about Kyle Pitts in this game? He had a career game, 3 touchdowns. He had 11 catches for 166 yards and those 3 touchdowns. That is good for 45.6 fantasy points, which is absolutely absurd, especially for a tight end. You don't even see Brock Bowers or prime Travis Kelce putting up those numbers consistently. That is just absolutely unfathomable. And for those of you who had him and believed in him all throughout the season and were smart enough to start him last night, you reaped all of the benefits from that. I would not be surprised if there are some of you out there that will single-handedly win your first-round matchup because of Pitts' performance. And that is just absolutely incredible. And to the unlucky few who had Pitts on their roster but did not qualify for the playoffs, I am so sorry because that is just a tough game to miss out on, and to have him contribute when you're already eliminated from the playoffs, that's really, really got to sting. I actually don't have him in any of the leagues that I'm in, but man, that would have been incredible. I do have Bijan Robinson in one league, though. He put up over 30 points with an incredible game, and there was a lot to say about Bijan Robinson on the season. He's a stud. We know this. He's uber talented, and I can't say enough about him. There's nothing to even sum up what he's done for the Falcons this year, but looking at Kyle Pitts, for those of you who aren't familiar, I keep hyping up this game as if it's like, oh, why is this so significant? It's because of the previous production of Kyle Pitts through this season. If you look at him this year, he really hadn't done anything. And a lot of people that's a huge reason why he slipped when it came to the fantasy drafts. And a lot of people were taking him really, really late. I'm talking like double-digit rounds just to take a flyer on him, because at that point, you're just throwing darts at who you think could potentially make a difference for your team and looking for that upside. But not a lot of people expected Kyle Pitts to produce as a consistent tight end 1 or top 12 at the position. And it shows in this season's stats, because from week 6 to 12, if you look at his fantasy output and just normal output in general in the NFL, he had scored double digits in fantasy points just twice in that time frame. And from weeks 13 to 15, the last 3 weeks, he has had 8+ targets in each of those games. And that is no coincidence, because Atlanta made Kirk Cousins the full-time starter the rest of the season after he lost his starting job to Michael Penix from Washington. At the start of this season, they said that Penix was going to be the starter. He was their rookie that they drafted last year while just signing Kirk Cousins to over a $100 million contract. Again, why they did that boggles my mind completely. I'm really, really sorry if you're a Falcons fan, but I'm sure most of you don't feel bad for them if you are Saints fans, as that is a good chunk of our audience, or Cowboys fans, whichever way you want to root for. But, it's I don't feel sorry for them either, personally. Being a Patriots fan, we beat them the 28-3 Super Bowl, so I reveled in that, obviously. So I unfortunately do not have any love for Atlanta, but it is incredible to see them pull something out like this. And I'm sure Saints fans are also happy, despite seeing Atlanta win. This knocks Tampa down a peg or two in the divisional race, because now they sit second place behind the Carolina Panthers in the NFC South. And that is going to be a very, very tight race, because Tampa, we got to talk about Tampa, because what is going on with the Buccaneers? Because they started 6-2 this season. Everybody thought they would be a shoo-in for the playoffs to win the division very, very easily. But starting 6-2, they have since lost 6 of their last 7 games. And like I said, they now dropped to second in their division, and they are 7-7 on the season. So it is very, very confusing to why they are dropping these games, especially, like I said, they had all their receivers healthy, their top 4 guys in the passing attack. Baker, in those first 8 games, people were talking about him in the MVP race, dating back to last year even with his production, and he had career highs in yards and touchdowns, I believe. So this is just very, very confusing and befuddling, honestly, as a football fan and the fan of the NFL, and just being able to watch all these teams. It's just very, very confusing. But at the end of the day, it's like people say, any given Sunday, any team in the NFL can just go into your house and win. And having that balance and that parity when it comes to the teams this year especially is really, really awesome to see as a fan, because it's pretty much wide open when it comes to who you think is going to win the Super Bowl or not. Sure, there's some favorites like the Rams and Patriots maybe. No, I'm just kidding. But, it's still anyone's game at this point, because the Rams did just drop a game to the Panthers, who are first place in the NFC South, by the way, after being the laughingstock of the division for at least the last 5 or 10 years maybe. And that's really, really awesome to see them kind of turn things around like that. But looking ahead to one of the other games that is on the slate with this weekend, and we have, again, with the Patriots, I got to throw them in, because, look, you can hate on me and the Patriots and all you want for trying to shoehorn them in here, but this is a very, very important game, especially for the division race. And they're taking on the Buffalo Bills, who are sitting at 9-4 right now, and the Patriots are, of course, 11-2. And if they beat Buffalo, this is what we call a hat and T-shirt game, where they can easily lock up the division and make the playoffs with a win against Buffalo this week. And that is something that has not happened since 2019. That is the last time that the Patriots won the AFC East. Every year since then, the last 5 seasons, it has been Buffalo every single year since then. And that has just been so painful to watch as a Patriots fan, because historically speaking, whenever Tom Brady was still there, he absolutely owned the Buffalo Bills. I want to say his regular season record against the Bills, I want to say he was 29 or 30-3 or something crazy like that. He did not lose against Buffalo. And to see them start to win now, although they still haven't won a Super Bowl, thank goodness, but it's been really awesome to see, and I really hope that continues, although it is a divisional opponent. They beat them earlier this season, and it is very, very hard to beat the same team twice, let alone 3 times if they eventually meet in the playoffs this year, because both teams are heading on that track. And the Patriots, first of all, they're on a 10-game win streak, which nobody really saw coming, although a few skeptics might say otherwise because of their strength of schedule, which was ranked dead last in the NFL with 32nd in terms of strength of schedule. And look, I get it. They haven't really played anybody. 7 of their last 8 wins have come against teams with losing records. So I get it. Look, the writing is on the wall here. I'm not advocating that they're the best team in the NFL by any means, but record says otherwise. They're tied with Denver for the best record in the NFL at the moment. But this game could change a whole lot of things. And if you look at their win totals in the last 2 seasons, they won a combined 8 games in those 2 seasons. So the fact that they are on a 10-game win streak here is nothing short of remarkable. Props to the front office for making this turnaround, but it could not have been done without these franchise cornerstones that they have developed. And I'm talking about, of course, quarterback Drake May from North Carolina. You have Will Campbell, the left tackle from LSU, for our LSU fans out there. He is unfortunately on injured reserve with a knee injury, so he will not play in this game. He did not play last week either against the New York Giants, so he is out at least another 2 weeks, unfortunately. So that is going to be very, very tough. That's a tough blow to a guy who had started every single game this year. He has been an anchor for that offensive line, and especially protecting Drake May's blind side. That is a huge blow to the Patriots, and it might be exploited here against Buffalo because the last time they played in Buffalo, they did give up 4 sacks to the Bills. So they really got to hone in and protect Drake May if they want any chance of winning and keep him upright. But like I said, the franchise cornerstones here with the Patriots that they have built, you have Christian Gonzalez as well at cornerback. He has been an absolute island, shutdown corner. You don't hear his name a lot when it comes to making plays or the stats or anything, but when it comes to cornerbacks, that's actually a good thing because that means that quarterbacks are not throwing towards his way or anywhere near his area, so he doesn't have the chance to make a play on the ball or a tackle. They're looking to the other side of the field completely. So he's been a lockdown corner aside from a couple plays where he's given up big plays. I believe last week he gave up a touchdown or the week before. I can't remember. Because I was watching with my friend at my house, and then he was saying, I was hyping him up, obviously, Gonzo, I call him, that's his nickname, and we were talking, I was like, yeah, he's been an absolute beast, he's one of the best cornerbacks in the league, and then like a play or two later, he gives up a touchdown, and I'm just like, wow, like, of course, what are the odds of me saying that, and then that happens, but, you know, they have been incredible, but Drake May especially has been the engine that has moved this team absolutely because you can't deny it any longer. He has been playing at an MVP level, and he would obviously have my vote for MVP, biased or not, whatever. The stats don't lie because in terms of completion percentage, he is first in the NFL. He is second in the NFL in passing yards and third in the NFL in passing touchdowns. So, I mean, if you're going to give an MVP to somebody, if you're just going by stats, I mean, it's his in the bag. Like, it's not even a question. But a lot of people like to talk about, you know, the strength of schedule and their opponents and everything, blah, 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 whatever. But aside from him, their rookie class, if you know me and you've heard me talk about the Patriots front office before, especially near the end of the Bill Belichick era, you'll know that I did not have a lot of nice things to say about that front office because they just did not know how to draft skill players. There was a crazy stat I saw that said, in terms of receiving touchdowns by a rookie, Mike Vrabel, who is now the head coach of the NFL, of the New England Patriots, is still within the top 10 of receiving touchdowns by a drafted Patriots player. And that is just so embarrassing from a front office standpoint to have Tom Brady, obviously the greatest quarterback of all time, and to not have a elite receiver around him aside from Randy Moss when they didn't even win anything. I mean, you had Julian Edelman, Chris Hogan, Danny Amendola, Malcolm Mitchell, and like I can go on and on about that, but they were playing with pretty much not the obvious elite top of the top receivers in most of Brady's time there. And that is starting to change, hopefully. Maybe not so much on the receiving end of it because a lot of their receivers this year are free agents that are producing. You have Kyle Williams, obviously, who was drafted in the 3rd round, but he really hasn't done much. He only has 5 catches on the year, but 2 of those were for touchdowns, including one last week against the New York Giants. So good for him. Hopefully he can continue to make strides, but we all remember the N'Keal Harry draft pick where he really didn't amount to anything, and that was just very unfortunate. That was a 1st-round pick out of Arizona State. Very unfortunate there. You know, hopefully he does well somewhere else, but it obviously didn't work out with the Patriots. And Sony Michel was another name that comes to mind, Georgia running back, who really didn't last a whole lot in the NFL. He retired after just a few seasons, but he was very, very vital to their 2018 Super Bowl run. So I will give him credit for that. He racked up a ton of touchdowns during that run. But another Georgia running back that they drafted this year was Travion Henderson. Now, for those of you who play fantasy, he finally got the playing time he needed and deserved, and he absolutely broke out in those games. Over the course of 2 of those games, he had 4 touchdowns in 2 games, and that was largely due to the injury to Ramondre Stevenson. And now that Stevenson is back, Travion Henderson's workload obviously has been reduced a little bit, but he is still producing at a high level, and I expect him to do so again this week. And it has been a pleasure to see the rookie class start to bloom a little bit. I mean, you have guys on defense that are absolutely ridiculous. I mean, just naming the names, we have Will Campbell, like I mentioned. You have Craig Woodson, who's a safety who has started every single game at safety for the Patriots this year as a rookie. You have Jared Wilson, a guard out of Georgia. They love their Georgia players. And then you have undrafted free agent linebacker Elijah Ponder, who has been making waves on special teams. You have long snapper Julian Ashby, who was drafted in the 7th round. Usually people just don't even pay any mind to those draft picks, but he has been a difference maker on special teams. And Andy Borregales, another special teamer, kicker, he was drafted in the 6th round out of Miami, and he just broke the franchise record for most points by a rookie last week, which is absolutely insane to have that many difference makers on a team that is 11-2. Usually when you think of teams where rookies get a lot of snaps, they're usually pretty bad. And in terms of snap counts for rookie classes, the Patriots rookie class is actually 2nd in the NFL in snap counts behind the Cleveland Browns, who are 3-10. Like I said, usually you would think it was a very bad team with rookies getting a lot of playing time, trying to get their footing in the NFL at the pro level. But that is just not the case with the Patriots. They have absolutely hit this rookie class out of the park, and it has been really, really awesome to watch. But they also have some veterans on tap as well. You have Stephon Diggs, who they signed in free agency, Kayshon Boutte, who was kind of walking his way around the league, another LSU receiver, and then you have Mac Hollins, who they poached from the Bills last season, and he has been a difference maker already. You have Demario Pop Douglas, who has been a fan favorite in New England. And then you have Hunter Henry, the tight end, who they also signed in free agency from the Chargers. And all of those guys have made such a great difference in the passing game. And while these guys, Diggs, formerly elite, debatable, but he is still a very, very good slot receiver. And the fact that all of these guys that he described as outcasts or just kind of thrown out to the side are all coming together and contributing, that is the way that the Patriots historically had operated in the dynasty years. And the fact that they are doing that again is really, really cool to see. Maybe not so much for the rest of the NFL, but it's been awesome to see from a fan standpoint, because I was in here thinking that after Tom Brady, we would never come close to winning anything for the next 20 plus years. So the fact that they're in prime position to win the division with a win here, oh my gosh, give me that all day. Just let us be competitive. That's all I wanted. And the fact that they are going beyond that it's just a bonus for me. But if you're a fantasy player and you're wondering who to start at running back, if you have Ramondre Stevenson or Travion Henderson or both, if you wanted some insurance, if you were able to swing that in the draft or through free agency or trades, would it have you? Buffalo, you should know, gives up the 8th most points per game to running backs. So this is what I was saying earlier. Despite them being in a timeshare and a split backfield with the return of Ramondre, I think that Travion is still poised for another great game here in terms of fantasy points. And I think that the Patriots will have to look to the ground here, especially considering that if you look at the weather forecast, it's supposed to be around like 29 degrees, definitely sub 30 with a small chance of snow. So if it does end up snowing, they could be relying on the run game here instead of the passing game, because if you look back a few years ago with the snow game between the Patriots and Bills again, the Patriots, most notably with Mac Jones, threw just 3 passes in that game and ended up winning still. They absolutely looked to the run and their defense to hold the thing down, and it ends up working out for them in the end. And we probably won't see something like that again with how well Drake May has played this year, but don't expect a shootout. Although the Bills just went and played Cincinnati in the snow, and then they ended up winning 39-34 or something like that. So I could be wrong there. I have been wrong before, I admit that, but if you look at who is favored in this game, the Patriots are actually home underdogs here. And this is going to be a very tough test, obviously, because as I said before, it's very, very hard to beat the same team twice, especially a divisional opponent where you play them twice a year, every single year. And the Patriots, they dismantled the Giants 33-15, and then they had a bye week, so they are well rested, fresh off the bye week. It's going to be interesting to see what their approach is to start the game and coming into this game, to see how they attack Buffalo, because this is going to be very, very tough. Again, if in the cold, although both teams are bred for it, still going to be a war zone, especially in the trenches. And Buffalo, it's hard to go against the Patriots, as big of a fan I am, but given all the factors and just being so hard to beat a divisional opponent twice, I'm going to go with Buffalo here, just because the Vegas thinks the spread will be very, very close. Although Patriots were much larger underdogs going into Buffalo and did win that game, but Patriots might be getting a little fatigued here with the 10-game win streak. They might be a little bit too high off of that, and I expect them to come back down to earth at some point. But just know, if they do beat Buffalo again here, I'm going to be insufferable with all of the haters saying they don't play anybody, and then they go in and beat Buffalo twice on top of all the nobodies that they played. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna be so annoying, but just bear with me here. But that's my prediction for that game, as much as I hate to say that. But looking ahead to another game that's very, very important to the NFC North, we have the Green Bay Packers, who are 9-3-1. They had that tie earlier with the Dallas Cowboys. And then you have the Denver Broncos, who are 11-2, who are tied with the Patriots for first place in the AFC East. And Denver, fun fact, is also on a 10-game win streak, and they are 2 games ahead of the Los Angeles Chargers in their division in the AFC West. And they're also the NFL's only unbeaten team at home. And Green Bay is also riding a win streak. They have won 4 straight. They just beat Chicago, who is also a division rival, to take first place in the NFC North. And then they face Denver here, and then they go and face Chicago in Chicago again to determine the NFC North. That's a very, very tough stretch for Green Bay, but I think they can pull it out. We'll see. Their success this season has largely been to Micah Parsons, who was controversially traded from the Dallas Cowboys earlier this season. And I feel so sorry for Cowboys fans here, because that was a franchise player in his prime that they absolutely just traded away for a bag of chips, essentially, and that is just very, very disheartening. But he has been elite. He is first in the NFL in pressure rate, but Denver's front, on the other hand, in their defensive front, has been arguably the best unit, because they have defensive tackle Zach Allen, who is ranked 3rd in quarterback hits, and then you have Nick Bonito, who is 5th in quarterback hits, and that unit has led them to being 1st in sacks, while also their offensive line is tied for 1st in the fewest sacks allowed, with just 17. And that is pretty remarkable, helping keep quarterback Bo Nix upright. And in terms of third down matchups, you have the number 1 third down defense with Denver versus the number 1 third down offense in Green Bay. So that's going to be a very, very tough matchup to see. We'll see who comes out on top in that one. And if you look at the stats with Christian Watson coming back from injury for Green Bay, the wide receiver, he missed the first 7 weeks while still recovering from an ACL injury. And since then, he has had 5 touchdowns in his last 4 games. And his 5 touchdowns on the season, fun fact, are the second most in a season since his rookie year when he had 9. And the fact that he was able to do that in such a short amount of time is nothing short of remarkable. I'm glad to see that he's recovering so well from that ACL injury. That can be a very, very tricky injury to come back from. That and Achilles, that is just the worst thing to ever happen in any sport. I would never wish that on my worst enemy. I can't imagine going through that. But Denver in this game are home underdogs, again, like the Patriots. And the last time they were home underdogs this season, it was against Kansas City, and they did end up winning that game. But the Chiefs this year have looked like a shell of their previous selves. And if you look at their Super Bowl runs and being in the AFC Championship each of the last few years, and they are clearly not the same team that they once were. So there's not a whole lot to say about that win. But for Green Bay, I expect them, as we mentioned, Denver's offensive line is elite. They're not going to be able to get to the quarterback as easily, and I think they end up leaning on their running game in this one with Josh Jacobs, who is third in the NFL in touchdowns with 12 and 15th in rushing yards with over 800 rushing yards. So I think they looked for them to lean in on Josh Jacobs and the run game in this one. But that's all I have today for today's episode of Football Friday. Be sure to tune in next week for another edition of Weekend Recap as we look to see what the outcomes from this game were and local area events that happened over the weekend. And you can follow us on our YouTube page at KTAL News, which is where you can find all of our previous editions of KTAL News now. But be sure to tune in every single day, Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. on KTALnews.com, which is also where you can get all of your local, breaking, and trending news stories. But for now, I'm Anthony Mocklin. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you for joining us.